is Weekend Calling with Claire Kerr on N Live Radio in association with the Retro Charts. I am delighted to be having a chat today with pop star and smash hit writer. He is the voice of Johnny Hates Jazz, Mr. Clark Datchler. Clark, welcome to my show.
Thank you, Claire. How's it going?
Very well, thank you. And how are you today?
Really good, thank you. Yeah, it's a bright, sunny day. I'm feeling good.
It is. It's lovely out there, isn't it, actually? Now the wind's dropped a bit. Now, I must...
Yeah. It's
looking good. I must start with your band name. Who is Johnny and why does he hate jazz so much?
Well, there are two members of the band now. There's myself and Mike Nacito, and Johnny is Mike's brother-in-law. He's never been in the band. And Johnny, who's ever such a nice fella, actually, many years ago, he was at a family gathering, at which Mike was at as well, and someone put on a Dave Brubeck record. It was Take 5, vinyl record, of course, because it was back in the day. And Johnny walked over to the record player, tore the album off, and smashed it in two over his knee.
Very dramatic.
And everyone was a bit shocked. You know, it's very dramatic and unexpected. And someone exclaimed, oh my goodness, Johnny hates jazz. And this kind of lodged in Mike's memory for some reason. So, when it came time to name the group, he came up with this, and we all chuckled. We thought it was a really cool name. I then stopped chuckling when I realized that I'd have to tell my dad the name. And my dad was a very successful jazz musician.
Yeah, very
so this
musical
was not going to go down well.
What did he say?
He said nothing to me for a month. That's how bad it was. he was appalled by the name. Appalled also because my dad had been my greatest supporter as well. He was one of the very few people who thought that Shattered Dreams was going to be an absolute hit. There were many people in the music business who thought it was doomed to failure, and he was the very first person to hear it as I was writing it, and who predicted that it was gonna do really well. So I didn't take any joy in him being upset by the name, but he soon got over it when he realized that it was just kind of it was a bit of fun.
Just for fun. And it was only Johnny. Yeah. Not your idea, but
exactly.
Johnny's feeling.
Not at all. Not at all. Yeah.
And Shattered Dreams, that was brilliant then to get your dad's backing and your support, and his support for you as a musician, and he was a very well-regarded musician, wasn't he? A saxophone player and did all of this jazz stuff as well on the circuit at the time. Yeah. So it was big for me. Sorry, go on.
Go for it.
No, I just mean it must have given you that confidence. I mean, really, Shattered Dreams, it was a massive hit in 1987, but it's still today, people still love it, don't they? And I just wondered what you think, or why you think what is the magic about that song?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I mean, it was... how to really explain this? I think it's really endemic of the 80s, actually, because you could pick on other songs from the 80s, Don't You Want Me, Human League, or Tainted Love, Soft Cell, or, I mean, the list goes on. It's a huge list. And really, Shattered Dreams was similar to all of those big hit records of the 80s in as much as it was a combination of a classically written song, no gimmicks, just classical songwriting that we in the 80s had learnt growing up listening to the great artists of the 60s and 70s. They taught us how to write. And then it collided with technology, drum machines, synths. I mean, synthesizers had been around in the 70s, but not in the prevalence that they were in the 80s. So synths, drum machines, samplers. And so it was a moment in time that will never be repeated. You can have all the technology you want, which we do now, just tons of it coming out of our ears. But the classical sense of songwriting has gone. It's over. It doesn't exist anymore. In my humble opinion. That's a bit of a grand statement on my part, because maybe some people would argue with me from that perspective. We'll see how a lot of the big, pop hits of today will be regarded in 20, 30 years time. We can't know that until we reach that point. We'll see. But in my opinion, Shattered Dreams has stood the test of time for that reason. It's the same reason as you could pick Silent Running, Mike and the Mechanics, or Tears for Fears, Shout. These are just, it's hard to explain, but I see it very much from a writer's perspective.
I think it should really be in some sort of like Writers' Hall of Fame as one of the best songs in history, because it is the lyrics can touch you, in many ways, and I think it's so relatable, isn't it?
That's a big part of it.
Yeah.
Claire, you're absolutely right. The notion of shattered dreams can mean different things to different people.
We've
and
all
unfortunately,
been there.
Exactly, for whatever reason. So you kind of, that's a very important part of it. Just as, for example, Turn Back the Clock, which is our third hit.
Yeah.
Turn Back the Clock relates to people very strongly as they get older, still listening to that song. And to be honest, I relate to that song much more deeply than I did when I wrote it, because I'm an older gent, and
the years have gone by.
The years,
time
exactly.
Since past.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right, Claire. The relatability of any song is a big part of what gives it longevity.
Do you feel? I imagine you, like, if you're having a bad day, you can just think, hey, I wrote Shattered Dreams though. So, you kind of get a sense of joy from that, knowing that you wrote this amazing master hit.
No, you can see I'm shaking my head. No, it's just not how it works. I'm sure you've had this answer before, Claire, from artists that whatever they're working on at that moment in time is the best thing they've ever done.
Yeah, so
that's just a case that you can't rest on your laurels. You constantly want to do more and more, and you kind of, it's not that you want to better yourself. It's just all about self-expression. I'm very, very grateful that Shattered Dreams did so well, and the stats astound me. The streaming stats are pretty big for Shattered Dreams, but there's so much more to communicate. It's as simple as that. So you've got to keep going.
Absolutely. And you left the band soon after, didn't you?
Yeah. Well, we had the album Turn Back the Clock came out in 1988. It was very successful worldwide. But I left the band a little while after that because, for various reasons. I was younger, certainly not as clear-headed as I am in my later years. But I think one of the things that bothered me, we have to remember this is the tail end of the 80s, and it was the 90s were beginning to wave their hands at us. And the 80s was given short shrift by the serious music press. And I think that because Johnny Hates Jazz was marketed in Britain, not in the rest of the world, but in Britain very much as a teen group, I think we started to get a lot of negativity coming our way. And I'm not, by the way, decrying us being in smash hits or anything like that. I think the problem was that our label at the time, Virgin, who did us proud in many ways, didn't try to spread the net wider, because in other parts of the world we were seen in a very different light. I often have people come up to me now after a gig and say, my favorite band of the 1980s was Depeche Mode, Tears for Fears, and Johnny Hates Jazz. And I'm not surprised at that, but the music critics of the time would have been. And I as the writer, I took their criticism very personally. And after a while, I just thought, you know what, I can't go on with this. I feel like I'm digging myself into a hole. And as the 90s was coming along, the music world was intent, I think, on trashing the music of the 80s quite heavily. And so I withdrew, decided to do my own thing, and I shouldn't have taken it so personally. In retrospect, I shouldn't have done, but I am an artiste after all.
Exactly, yeah.
And so that
was the right thing.
Away.
It was the right thing for
Well,
you to do at the time.
at the time, it felt like it was, but I think there are many different ways of seeing that situation, and I don't think it was right on all levels. But nevertheless, I did it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if we now fast forward about 20 years, you reunited again. Then you hooked up again with Mike to start writing and recording.
Yeah, well, that was an interesting one. Actually, Calvin was still in the band at that time. The original lineup was me, Mike, and Calvin Hayes. And when we regrouped, Calvin was still going to be part of it. And so I was speaking to both of them on the phone. I was living in the high mountain desert of Arizona.
Nice.
In a very different world. I had a solar powered studio. I was very intent on writing songs with that was socially relevant to our times. This goes back to me writing "I Don't Want to Be a Hero." That's always been part of what I do. And eventually, it seemed like the right time to just get together. Really, interestingly, I'd written this song called "Magnetized," and I felt that I'd made a conscious decision to write a Johnny Hates Jazz-esque song for the current time. And that time we're talking about 2008, 2009. Mm-hmm. And so I met up with Mike in Cambridge in a Italian restaurant by the River Cam. I walked past it the other day, actually, because I was spending a few days with Mike, because we've just filmed a new video. And it was interesting. I stopped in front of the restaurant and I was remembering what it was like having not spoken to each other for 22 years and then meeting up in that restaurant. And I kid you not, it was like we had seen each other the week before.
Oh,
it was
lovely,
so natural.
Good.
Yeah, so natural. Yeah. And I have to say that was true of Calvin as well. Calvin didn't stay in the band. He stayed with us for probably about a year, and then for his own personal reasons, he had to back out and do other things. So, but we got off to a good start, me and Mike. We've kind of gone on from then. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess it's that bond of being in a band and going on tour and knowing each other so well that it's one of those special friendships that you can just pick up.
It's a weird one, because obviously with a lot of bands that you probably speak to, Claire, they were childhood friends. They were, like Spandau, all went to school together. We weren't like that. We met in Rack Studios in St John's Wood in London when I was a young up-and-coming singer-songwriter. Calvin was the son of the label owner, Mickey Most. And Mike was a young engineer at Rack Studios. So we all kind of got together without that depth of history, but with a different understanding of what it was going to take to do well. And I think we bonded in that joint sense of seeing the business from a different perspective. We weren't just a young band who'd got together and were trying to make it. We're a young band, but we had a huge amount of history, each one of us. And so I think in that sense, I mean, me and Mike still can talk about the past in a way that is very particular to us.
Experiences, those shared experiences.
Yeah, they're really important. There's no doubt.
Yeah, special bond. And so the whole writing and recording thing went really well for you guys, but then you were very poorly, weren't you?
I became very ill, actually. Yeah, we had released Magnus. We went on to record Magnetized, the whole album that I had written and Mike produced, and it came out. Magnetized was getting an intense amount of radio play. Yeah, it was, and then I was walking on Hampstead Heath in London with my kids, and I collapsed and was rushed to hospital. It was discovered I had massive internal bleeding, and the reason for that, it was revealed by the doctors, was that I had this rare form of cancer that would not respond to chemotherapy. It was a question of they had to operate on me and hope they caught it in time.
Must have been absolutely terrifying for you and your family.
Do you know what? It was more than anything. It woke me up, and although I like to think this is before the phrase "woke," by the way. I mean, this is properly woken up when you are when you realize the fragility of our existence. And I really thought for a while, I thought, you know what, maybe this is my time. And if that's the case, how incredible. I never thought I was going to go this early. And it wasn't really with a sense of sadness. It was a sense of wonder. I was just amazed that this was happening to me. Typical songwriter, I started writing about it. You know, what do you do? Well, you express it. You know, I yes, there were moments of concern, but I felt that, you know, if this is what life had in mind for me, then wow, that is amazing. I really thought I was going to live to be an old man. But fortunately, the operation happened and they removed the tumor at a very early stage, and I was given a clean bill of health. However, Magnetized as a single and album had lost all momentum. I mean, I was out of action for months. So we just decided after that to take it slow, get back into the live realm, just do festivals, and let me recover and find my feet again, which is what we did.
Absolutely. And do you think now, with your new album, Wide Awake, that your experience has kind of influenced this album?
I think it has. But like I say, rather than me having a life and death experience and then, you know, suddenly deciding to write serious stuff, I'd always written serious stuff. I mean, all my solo stuff in the 90s is you know, plumbs the depth of the human psyche and human experience. So I've always been into that. I think what it did is that it reaffirmed the importance of doing it now, not saying, well, I'll do that. You know, this is what you're told in the music business. You're told, you know, have your hits, do well, you know, don't rock the boat, then you can get serious later on. And I'm thinking to myself, you've got to be joking. I don't have time. So yeah, Wide Awake, half of the Wide Awake album is full of very socially relevant and I think quite challenging songs, but also very optimistic. The other half is very, you know, is lighthearted and you know, touching, but not to the degree that some of the other songs are. So I feel very strongly about Wide Awake. It's what I want to say, and Mike feels good about it too. And let's see what happens.
Well, it's a brilliant album, you know, and the time is now. It's going to be released very soon, isn't it? Wide Awake's out on the 14th of August. But we must talk about your preview single as well, which is brilliant. It's such a catchy little ditty. Like once I'd listened to it a couple of times, I was already then just singing along, you know, it just sticks in your head, another earworm. So absolutely brilliant. So tell me about this single.
Oh, are we talking about the new single, New Day Ahead?
Yes, New Day Ahead, yeah.
Oh, yeah, New Day Ahead, yes.
Yeah,
of course,
and that's out on the 7th, isn't it?
Yes, New Day Ahead is it's a song of mine that is very dear to my heart because I've been an environmentalist for many years, an activist. And
you won an award for that, didn't you, as well, the Green Tech Award?
I did, yes. I was. I helped start what's become the most important environmental awards ceremony in Europe. It's called the Green Tech Awards, and I was there at the beginning with a couple of chaps, Marco and Sven, German environmental engineers, who wanted to combine an awards ceremony with music. And there's not many musicians they could go to who genuinely felt deeply about this subject, and they knew from my solo work especially that I really wore my heart on my sleeve when it comes to how we relate to Mother Earth. So I started these awards with them. I performed at the very first awards ceremony, and it was all these scientists and academics and journalists getting these awards. And right at the end, they said, we have one more special award. And I'd already been on stage and sung some songs. And they said, it's for Clark Datchler for his personal commitment to the environmental cause. So I was incredibly moved and slightly embarrassed that I was being awarded something at the same time as these brilliant people. But fast forward, after many environmental songs, we come to New Day Ahead, which is a very positive, can-do take on how we face the climate crisis.
It's really uplifting, actually, isn't it?
Well, look, I mean, let's before I go off on a, you know, on on one about the environment, let me say that my influence with this track, and Mike's as well, in terms of how he produced it, because he produced it brilliantly. The influence was really some of the glam rock bands we grew up listening to.
Yeah.
So Sweet, T-Rex, Bowie. It's a glam record. It's Johnny Hates Jazz does glam.
Does glam. It's got all of that in it, and it sort of makes you want to like stomp along and save the earth. It's that kind of thing, isn't it?
Well, that was the idea,
I love it.
And it really does, and it's very much addressing the young people of today who started the whole climate strike thing. And I think that with the acknowledgement of the likes of David Attenborough, Chris Packham, etc., becoming really important to the environmental movement, and quite rightly, we've all got to do our bit. And it's really me saying to the young people, look, as an environmentalist, a lifelong environmentalist, you know, you got to turn up the volume here. You're doing great, and you got to keep doing great. And you have my full backing, and we're going to do this together. And so that's what New Day Ahead is. It's saying we can win this. We can win this battle, but we cannot drop the ball. You know, this pandemic has thrown us all off course. And I'm really wanting to rally the troops again to say, you know, the pandemic happened. If the scientists are correct, which I think they are, and we should trust them, the pandemic happened because of how we are disregarding life on Earth, how we're mistreating wildlife, and we're destroying the wild places where those wild animals need to continue to live. And that's where these viruses find their hosts. You know, the COVID-19 is benign when it comes to most animals, but it's not when it comes to most humans. So we better give animals their space. We better give wildlife their ability to carry on existing as they've done for millennia, and stop encroaching on their world. We can have our world, but we've got to learn to live in balance with the rest of the earth.
It's a perfect time, really, isn't it, for then this single to be released? And it's such a powerful medium to kind of connect with people, to share your message through music.
I really hope that is the case. You know, I will see. The fact is, Claire, is that we have to be realistic that music has stopped being, chart music has stopped being such a strong conduit for songs that really speak of change. You know, I grew up in the 70s, and some of the biggest hits had that as their core message. You know, whether it was Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, it was John Lennon, the Moody Blues, you know, it was punk. You know, I was well into punk. And then into the 80s, you know, there was us, there was Tears for Fears, there was Talk Talk, there was so many bands did that. And I think we've kind of lost our way a bit. I think there's so much emphasis on relationships now and attitude that we've forgotten that music actually is supposed to be a vehicle for change.
Absolutely.
You know, so I hope New Day Ahead will have its day. I really do, because I think it deserves it, and it's needed.
I think it will, and I think, you know, the whole album itself, that there's so much on there, something for everyone, but there are really powerful messages within your songs, and they're so uplifting as well. So I think, you know, I think it's a fantastic album, and that's out on the 14th of August, so not long now. So again, just
actually,
the right
I should
time.
say, Claire.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, Claire. I should say it's actually been put back to the 21st.
Okay, the 21st. Well, okay.
21st of August. Yes. Sorry, you didn't get that information.
No worries, but that's not too much longer to wait, is it? So we can be patient. No. It's still within the month, which is really exciting for all your fans, because you still have such a massive and loyal fan base. You really do still have such a following. So, you know, I think it's going to be very, very well received.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you today. And, you know, I wish you every success with the new album and everything else, really, all your endeavours in the future as well.
Brilliant, Claire. Thanks a lot. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
All right.
Bye-bye for now.
Cheers,
Bye.
Claire. Take care of yourself.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, it's a crazy time and there is no denying.